Okay, it is September 18th, 2024, 5 p.m. We are here at second floor of City Hall for a budget special meeting. So this is one of 4 meetings we're having to kind of go over the city budget, and then the budget as a whole will be presented to the Common Council once everything is refined and all the final numbers are in. With that, clerk, please take the roll call.
Stephen Jopek, Luke Kramer.
Here.
David Holt, Gerald Anderson.
Aye.
Robert Luter.
Here.
Here. Carrie McLowski.
Here.
Leanne Felton.
Here.
Thomas Barnett. Chris Hannes.
Here. So we do have quorum. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to public comment, which would be number 4. Would there be any public comment at this time?
Hello? There. I just wanted to talk about the tree portion of the city budget. I was glad to see that there's $5,000 in there because the grant is not intended to replace the money that the city normally pays for forestry. And so I do know that DNR kind of looks after that. And then the other thing I wanted to come on talk about is the fact that if we're going to do Messer Street, that we should include that in the street project because it really is only 40 trees per year for the city out of the grant, plus the 5,000. So I would not be able to complete both Messer Street and Oneida Avenue, which we have done no work on Oneida. So like I said, it's critical that we have some money in the budget for forestry and then also to include the trees for the Messer Street project under that project so that we can get Oneida done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Was there anyone else for public comment? Did any of the alders receive any public comment? Okay. Number 5. So just before we get into that, I just want to make an announcement. So as some of you know, we have different funding sources for the city for our budget. Everything from room tax, PRAP tax, some of the fees that we collect throughout the year. The main one is our general fund. And most of these budget items from tonight's come from general fund. What funds the general fund is pretty much the property taxes. So everyone who resides within the city who owns property pays taxes. A portion of that comes to the city to fund this. For the most part, that funds public safety, the vast majority. This year, I'm confident we will find a way to make it work moving into the future. You guys as council are going to have to make some tough decisions of, are we going to increase to fund our services we have? Are we going to look to hybrid and make the services more cost effective, or cut? So unfortunately, vast majority of that is public safety, which is your fire, your police, your inspection department. So something to keep in mind. It's not a this year problem, but long term, our current rate of income for general fund is not sustainable. So, and a lot of this is due to, you know, you look at your own household budgets. You know, over the last 5-6 years, you're seeing a 15-20% increase just to keep your lights on, just to feed your family. City government's no different. You know, we don't get a price break. We tend to actually pay slightly more than the general household does. So with that, the income is not supporting the cost of operation. So just food for thought, something to keep in mind as we go through these budgets of ways we can make our general fund more sustainable for the future. So with that, moving on to number 5, which is introduction of new business. Discussion A, which would be the 2025 proposed city budget. So we have in your packet a couple different ones here. So we're going to start with the city council and mayor's budget. So if you look on page 2 in your packet, you got city council, committees, and boards. So we got it broken down by different categories. You got, you know, per diem, which is pretty much what you guys get reimbursed and paid for the work. You got some healthcare-ish, not healthcare, OSDI. You got professional services. So this is anytime we have to contract out for a professional to get us back information. Legal fees would be Steve Sorensen. And the list kind of goes on and on. I don't know if Wendy or Patrick wants to speak to any of these or just open up to more Q&A or...
Pretty straightforward.
So any questions or discussion by council on the first set? Mr. Anderson?
Well, I wondered if Wendy should give a sort of an explanation of how the attorney's fees are divided between different pages. I have other questions too, but start with that one.
So actually, the attorney fees, when they send us an invoice, they give us great detail of what the billable hours are for, and then it goes through Patrick, the city administrator, who codes it and allocates it to the correct department that has requested the information from or interacted with the city attorney that the city is being billed with, and then we post it to their individual department's legal line item.
So what will happen is this, it'll come, it's usually 2 to 3 pages, and it will say the date, I don't know if it says the time, but it'll say date and what action took place, like spoke with a city council member on X, whatever X is, and then it will have the amount of time that he spent on it and the rate. So usually if it says city council member, it gets put to this budget. If it says mayor, it gets put to that. Now if he spoke with the mayor and myself, I split it between the mayor and the administrator, and so on and so forth.
I think it's appropriate to divide it that way. If we wanted to find out the total of what we're spending on legal, we would have to add up each one, right?
Well, actually, I already have that spreadsheet built.
Oh,
So with our my Excel program, I can put in the date for the year that you're looking for, and I already have it where it'll pull from our database what actual amount we spent in grand total for the year. The only thing that I cannot do is I cannot pull the utilities legal fees out of there because it goes, the utilities chart of accounts is different than the general fund and the other regular government fund. So the line item that the utilities legal fees goes to, there's a multitude of other items that go there. But I can definitely pull the total cost per year for the general fund.
So to shed a little bit more light on this topic, because I'm assuming you're looking at previous year's expenses versus this year versus budgeting.
yeah.
Last year, we budgeted $30,000, knowing that we're going into a union contract year, meaning this year, we have the police and fire unions. So that's why it was inflated to $30,000, which, since we're still pretty early in that process, that's why year-to-date expenditures for attorney for this category is kind of low versus projected. The other question I would have more for Wendy is, I don't think everyone realizes, up until about a month or two ago, the city of Rhinelander had 2 attorneys. You know, we had Steve Sorensen, who was the ones we all see and work with, but then we had another part-time attorney who dealt with more the parking tickets, the traffic tickets, that kind of stuff. How is that broken down on these budgets? Is that just still in the legal fee item?
Yes, it is. The part-time attorney was directly through the police department, and that was charged to the police department. And then that individual invoice was separate from the Von Briesen invoices, so it flowed right through the police department workflow so that they could double check, was all the work accurate?
So I just have a quick question then. So if I'm hearing you correctly, every time one of the 8 of us would contact Steve for anything, that goes to our line.
Yep.
Yes.
On the other hand, if we just channeled that question through Patrick, that would go through Patrick's line.
Yeah, you know, wouldn't that be great? Some of my employees have actually caught on to that too, trying that same thing.
Well, I'm just trying to get a feel for that because it
Yeah.
seems like maybe with, even at 21,000, maybe we're spending too much time talking to legal when we see the guy every other week here.
I would say probably the better statement to be made is Steve Sorensen charges us by the minute. if you could get an answer or a potential answer from the guy who we pay the same amount if you call him or not, it's more economical, where every time you dial Steve Sorensen, that clock is just like riding in a taxi cab. So I would always suggest you call city administrator, who's a salaried position, first. If he needs to call the administrator, he can, or he might even know the answer or direct you in the right direction. To be responsible to the people we're taxing.
Every time you call him, remember, it's $295 an hour. So every time you call him, there's that rings. Every time he's sitting here for these meetings, a charge is being incurred. So, and that's going to be the same with any attorney that you have. So just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that really wasn't my question. The fact that it's that amount of money means we're spending too much time talking to them outside of this meeting. That was my point. Like, it's really clear.
You also get charged when he comes to the meeting too. So I mean, there is that as well. So
Yeah, I get it.
whenever we have him for a plan commission meeting, you guys won't be charged, but the inspections department will be charged for things like that, or when we need him in there. And you need to have an attorney. Every community has an attorney. So I mean, it's something you absolutely need, but we need to be judicious when we use them.
That was kind of where I was going. Like, I get that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a necessary thing. However, it seems like we can maybe be a little bit smarter about the way we're spending or asking those questions or spending that time.
And I'm sorry, Mayor, please go.
No, and I mean, if you're looking at 2021, 2022, some things to keep in mind there too is some of this period, we didn't have a city administrator. So when you don't have a city administrator, the mayor's office as well as the attorney take on more responsibilities, so that's where when you look at some of these different years, you see it kind of all over the place. And it's based on, one, did the city have an ongoing lawsuit, which we have had in the past, that cost money. Were we doing a lot of stuff that the attorney was involved in, such as, getting land donated, big chunks of land being annexed in, big construction projects where we're acquiring land, doing that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't look at these bigger numbers and say it was wasteful expenses, but you got to keep in mind from year to year what our attorney does for us changes based on what's happening under union contracts, just stuff like that. So is there ways to make it more efficient? Oh, I 100% agree, but I wouldn't look at as, like in 2021, more efficient might have been 50,000 versus 53, hypothetically. So
Also keep in mind, in 2021, we did do bargaining for both unions. And then we had Von Briesen attorneys involved with that, separate from the every day, every year activity.
So, Mr. Anderson?
So is this the line that the work on bargaining issues would come in under city council committees and boards?
I would refer to Wendy on that one.
What issues? The
Bargaining situations.
bargaining? Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Let's see, assessor contract. That reminded me of the idea of putting away money toward reassessment one of these years. Where would that show up?
So right now, and I don't know if you remember, but we started putting money aside we have a fund 213 for special projects. And at the end of the year, when I've done all the reconciliation and I've seen if we were able to afford it and be within budget, we have transferred twice into the special projects fund for the revaluation. And I believe it's like 131,000 that we have set aside for that. But I just sent in information to Patrick and Chris. By law, we have to be within compliance at least once out of every 5 years for what our assessment is compared to the state's equalization assessment. So, and we have been compliant. We have not been compliant in, I think it's 23 and 22, but prior to that, the last time we were not compliant was, I believe, 2013. So we're still within the range.
Yeah. So worst case scenario, and if I'm not mistaken, the reassessment was about 300,000, which that expense will incur over a couple years of redoing the assessment, would be 3 years away, worst case scenario. Now, if we come back into compliance, it kind of resets that clock. So we roughly have saved a third of the cost, with 3 more years would be the worst case scenario when we have to start expending cash. Would it be, so we got roughly, worst case scenario, 5 more years to come up with the remaining money, if that makes sense. So anything else on this first section? Okay. Moving on to the mayor's budget. Pretty obvious. I mean, there's not really a lot here, to be honest. I don't know if you guys have any questions about it or anything. Okay.
Can I just make one comment back up on the city council budget? I just wanted to make you aware that for 2024, we had budgeted $1,500 and we reduced it to $1,000, but we do have money available for 1 or 2 council members to go to a conference. They have like an annual league conference that would be great for one of you to attend. I don't know if you wanted to take turns going, but there's just a wealth of information out there that's presented, and you do have some money to have that opportunity.
Okay, so moving on to page 3, this would be administration. We would take that first section. I don't know if you want to speak to
Yeah,
that.
relatively straightforward. The big number in there that you'll see, well, one of the big numbers is the $10,000 that Eller's development. So basically, whenever we have a developer's agreement, we have something that's going to be working with TID, we work with Ellers, and they are worth every cent that we spend with them. So really good advisors. How long have we been working with Ellers? Years.
Many, many years.
Yeah, so that's pretty much the big one, but not too much in the way of change.
So a lot of that, where that comes from too, is when a developer wants to come to town and they're looking for financial assistance. So similar to the 2 hotels. Up until the point that TID is made, we have to put those expenses somewhere. So you could all recall, you know, from closed session where we had a development going, and then just fell off the table for whatever reason. Well, the expense of bringing Ellers in still happens. So until the project happens and a TIF is made, then those costs get reassigned to that TIF district. But if it don't happen, this is where that cost would be burdened. So, Mr. Anderson?
I just wondered if Wendy wanted to make a general comment about increases in health insurance and that sort of thing.
My general comment on the increases of the health insurance is I have a plug number in there, and I'm hoping to goodness that we can bring that plug number down quite a bit.
Yeah.
But we do not have any actual numbers of the rate, the increase of the rate. I think we were assured that we were not going to get a flat rate where it stays the same. But last year, I think the increase was about 9%. So I increased it just a little bit more as a placeholder. But I'm hoping to bring that down. But no, we have not gotten any information. But we are providing our broker with information so that they can negotiate.
Do you mind if I?
Go ahead.
So the other thing is, Rachel, Wendy, and I met with M3, our insurance broker, and they're expecting double-digit increase, 10% at the minimum. They're just costs you have to carry. So, and because of where we're at, what did they say? It was a insurance oasis or something like that, they said, where we're located in the state of Wisconsin.
Desert?
What's that?
A desert? Is that?
Yeah, it may have been a desert. So, yeah, desert wouldn't be an oasis. You're right. Been a long day, Gerald. They said basically it's going to be, we pay some of the highest costs for insurance in Wisconsin. So, it is what it is. We're going to see what we can do. If we can make any changes, if any changes are possible, we will investigate them.
Ms. Mikulowski?
Have we looked with other brokers? Because the county only went up 3%.
Yeah, the county is a self-funded. They do it a bit differently than we do. I don't think we're in the position to do self-funding, which would be nice. But yeah, basically our choices are Aspirus and Security Health. Those are our choices. So M3 is looking at both of those.
And if I'm not mistaken, we should have that initial increase number a couple weeks, hopefully.
Here's
I was
hoping.
actually hoping we
Yeah.
had it by now, but
So once we get that number, then I think it becomes, what's our next move? Because hypothetically, if it's 2%, hey, why do anything? If it's 40, well, we got to do something. So I think we're at the point now, we're waiting for that first initial number and then go from there.
But I do want to let you know that it is very specific to our group plan. So maybe the county had a better year for claims compared to what the city had in this past year for claims. So that has a lot to do with it, not necessarily who the broker is.
So to give you kind of a reference point, last year, the amount ours went up and the percentage that the town, or city of Wausau went up was within 1 point of each other. You know, there was something I met with the mayor down there at a conference, and so, I mean, ours was pretty similar to Wausau for last year, which doesn't mean a lot for this year, but it seems similar entities, similar bodies, so.
And we are grouped with other communities as well, like size, like I think Merrill is one of them that we're, for an example, we are grouped with them. So when they look for insurance, when they look for rates, we're grouped with other people. We're not standing alone. So
is there anything else for the administration category? Okay, moving on to information technology, IT. Any questions for that? Okay, moving on to insurance. So insurance, a lot of this is kind of workman's comp. We don't have a lot of say in it. Some of it is also our insurance for general liability, through our insurance provider for property insurance, that kind of stuff. I don't know if anyone had any questions on that category. Okay, and then transfer to special revenue funds. So some of these are on here because we have to keep them on for 3 years once we stop using the fund. So when you look at the transfer to parking lot advisory board, that fund, I believe, 2 years ago was disbanded because we didn't have a funding source. So that, in a couple of years, will just be falling off. When you look at transfer to share ride, this would be how we fund and manage the Rhinelander Public Transit. So we collect revenue through that, and then usually we have to make it whole by funding it a little bit out of general fund. Transfer to special projects, transfer to the landfill. If you guys do or do not know, the city technically owns an old landfill off of Old 8, which is kind of inside of the bypass, just north of, I believe that would be the Pelican River, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So that's a landfill we own, and we have to do maintenance on for still quite a few years. So, and then transfer to capital projects. So I don't know if any of those you want us to go into more detail or you have questions about.
I would like to just add, with the transfer to the shared ride, it was just, I think, 2 days ago that I started getting information to start planning for the application for 2025. So this 25,000 is just matching what we did last year. I do not know yet what the local share would look like because we haven't gotten closer to that point. And usually I do the shared ride and the landfill budgets later on. But I do know with the landfill, we have exhausted that fund, but we will still have landfill costs that we're going to have to absorb in the general fund. But that is not figured in just yet.
Mr. Anderson?
What kinds of capital projects was that? Apparently that's something we don't need anymore or just not using right now?
In 21 and 22, on the
Yes.
transfer to capital projects, that is when we, well, I can tell you the 55,000, here's the example. At the end of 22, we had enough funds that were not spent out of the parks budget. But the year that it becomes an actual expenditure is the year that you receive the product. So they wanted to purchase a truck, but it wasn't until after January 1st that we realized, after I got all the invoices in, through January 31st that posted back to finalize all the numbers for the 22 year, that we knew that there would be money for a truck. Well, the time has expired. We can't expense a truck that we received in 23 to 22. So instead of allowing that extra money to just flow into the general fund balance, we made a transfer into into one of the borrowing funds, which is a capital projects fund, so that money fled into the fund balance of that capital projects fund, and then we could expend it in the 23 year. So it's just a timing issue, but we wanted to double check, did we really have this money, or are we going to have to hold back on some of the capital purchases?
Okay, so it looks like we're moving on to page number 4, which is financial and treasurer. I don't know if there's anything you want to speak to specifically, Wendy, first, or?
No, this one is probably the easiest one for me to do because it's the same year after year, just with a little bit of inflation, but it's the same amount of conferences that I budget for. I hope to go to at least 3 budgets, depending on what the workload is in the office, but it helps me do a better job when I can get out and just refresh every year on the different topics. I go to the Ehlers Institute in February, and then one year I'll focus on the TIF districts, the next year I'll focus on the borrowing, and those are activities that we do all the time, but not on a daily basis. So it's just nice to have that refresher of getting these facts down.
Can I just glom on for a second? Yep. Training is incredibly important for these folks to go to, all the department heads. Really, really important, and I've harped on it quite a bit. Sometimes you get stuck in an area where you think you're the only one that has the whatever problem it is going on right now. All communities face the same thing. This is my 5th one. Trust me, they all face the same thing. Rhinelander's a great place to live. Love this city. But a lot of the issues it faces are the same as other communities have. Some different, few different, but most of them are the same. And for when the department heads get out and get to go to the conferences and to network, not only are they increasing their knowledge base and their networking base, which can help get answers later on, but it also kind of encapsulates what they're doing. They can see that other people have this same thing. Misery loves company, I don't know. But you can see that they're working together. People are doing the same thing as Wendy and as Austin and other communities. So training is really important.
Mr. Anderson?
The line 210, I see Ehlers there and Headwaters. What does that line refer to?
So that line is every year, every year, because we have outstanding general obligation debt, we have to file a report as a disclosure notice. So because we are a small office and I can't do everything by myself, I work in partner with Ehlers. They send me a document each year. I review it. We match to make sure what I have in our system is matching what they have in their records, and then they file that continuing disclosure on our behalf. And then also there's other reportable events that they monitor, and then they file that documentation.
Is the Headwaters report, Headwaters part of it something similar?
No, I could probably just take that right off, because all that was the shredding. And because I am trying very hard to go paperless and use Laserfiche for document retention. I think I don't even use them once a year. I think it's maybe once every 2 years that I have them pick up a bin to shred. So I'll just remove that from the line so it's not confusing.
Just as a point of clarification, Wendy, is every year we have to do for all of our TIF districts a yearly report that I think Ehlers is involved in, or no, they're not anymore? Okay.
We just have to do an annual meeting on the TIF districts, so I take care of that. But you're correct, we do an annual report of financial statements, and our auditors take care of that.
Okay.
And then they provide us with the final audited financials, and then I report it to the state for the annual report to the state.
One of the things that I'd like to hit on, Wendy said something that's key that goes for every department head you see in here and everyone you're going to see coming up. This is a lean community. Every department is working, doing more with less. So we don't have, I worked in a community that was half the size of Rhinelander. They had a finance director treasurer, an assistant finance director treasurer, and a administrative assistant, half the size. So Wendy does a lot. Right now she's pinch hitting for HR. For 3 months she was pinch hitting water. So you're going to see that in every one of the departments, fire, parks, police, clerks. You're going to see it again and again and again. So I just want to kind of give you an idea that that's going to keep coming up. So.
Any other questions for this budget? Okay. Moving on to number so 5, we cannot actually speak about. Page 5, based on it was not actually on the agenda as being talked about tonight. So that would be at the next meeting. So we'd be moving to number 6, page 6, which would be the city buildings. So when you look at salaries, we don't have an official building grounds employee. So it's part of someone's salary is allocated to this category. So it's, I believe right now, someone from the Parks Department is doing the maintenance when they can on the buildings. So some of their salary is allocated to this. Same with the overtime, which we're not planning for, the healthcare insurance, telephone for our buildings, water, janitorial, and it goes on and on. Didn't know if you guys have any questions about this. I don't know if Jeremy had anything you wanted to add since you kind of oversee it.
So there's no more janitorial service?
So we tried to outsource it at one time, and I think we had Victory, and then we went to a different company. We even tried with Headwaters, but just the cost versus the type of service wasn't working. We also looked at bringing on different departments, such as fire department, police department, public works, making it a part-time, bigger job. We ran into some problems based on some of the security issues with having that type of person in a police department, as well in the clerk's office for sake. So with that just not working out for the benefit, we brought it back in-house, where at least here at City Hall, each office is kind of taking out their own trash, and then we have a person coming in, vacuuming, doing light cleaning.
Okay.
So. Okay, not seeing nothing else. We move on to number 7, which is parks. I don't know if Jeremy, anything you want to touch on first, or just if stuff comes up. Okay. So the first couple are pretty boilerplate, your life insurance, healthcare, salaries, professional services. We're not planning any at this point. Legal fees, none at this point. Then you fall into some more boilerplate, electrical, propane for the cemetery, telephone, water, some maintenance. As you keep going down, it's kind of just more day-to-day operation stuff. Didn't know if any of you have questions about? Mr. Anderson?
Machinery and equipment, 810. Is that repairs or purchases? Or,
That would be purchasing.
and
So, if I'm not mistaken, this is for a snow removing piece of equipment? Mower. So it's for a commercial lawn mower.
and there's no plan to buy any vehicles next year.
Well, so they're requesting it for next year. So one of the things that might happen is next year is the year that we borrow the $1 million. So something like that, we could shift, if needed, out of the general fund, that expense item, and put it into borrowing if there's room. So that's something you might see move around a little bit based on how the general fund is funded
But
versus...
we're not putting it in the budget at this point.
Correct.
correct.
It is requested, but we do not have the capacity in the general fund to pay it just yet. So
Okay.
I have it on the list for the borrowing.
Responding to what the mayor said at the beginning, looking to the future as things get tighter, we may have to reconsider how much we borrow or how often we borrow and that sort of thing too.
Well, to piggyback off that, I would say to every second year when we borrow $1 million, that kind of originated from our general fund not being healthy enough to support it. So the logic was, let's borrow and then write off the expense as we make our principal and interest payment over years on big capital, you know, your front end loaders, the local sheriff for an ambulance, that kind of stuff. So that was a way to kind of extend the general fund's ability without burdening the taxpayer. Now the drawback is when you borrow 10 grand to buy a lawnmower, that lawnmower is actually costing you more than 10 grand because you're paying interest.
Right.
So that's something that at some point will catch up with us. So if there was a discussion in the future and an action where we're going to raise, you know, do a public safety millage hypothetically or raise taxes, that would be one of the things we should be looking at removing, that we won't be borrowing money every 2 years, pay off the current debts and not have that interest incurred. Currently, we don't have that as an option because our general fund can't handle buying capital improvement items at this point.
I would like to add to that. So there are a couple of restrictions on our budget. We have something called the expenditure restraint, where the state will look at what our budget amount is for the current year, and to qualify under this expenditure restraint program, which if we qualify and we follow their restriction, we will receive this year, it's $242,000. They will allow us to increase the next year's budget by 60% of the net new construction and the August CPI. They will send us that notice, the official amount, September 30th. But I did look up what we have so far of the information that I can find, because they released the August CPI. It was 2.5%. And I didn't write down the net new construction, but it would be a total of, we should be allowed to increase our 25 budget by 4.36%, which is $413,000. So we have where if we had if we had revenue and we had, say we had 600,000 extra of revenue, we would not be able to budget the 600,000 of expenditures, because then we're gonna discontinue receiving that $242,000 of revenue. So one of the ways out of it, it's just strictly on the general fund. That is why we'll transfer something to like the special projects fund, because that's not in the equation whatsoever. It's just on the general fund. So that was one of the ways too, is by starting to put money aside in the special projects fund for like the revaluation, or moving the money for the truck in the next year, we didn't have to budget an increased expense in the following year. We had it in a separate fund. So that kept us within the expenditure restrictions. So then so we have the levy limit, where we're restricted on how much we can actually tax. We have the expenditure restraint, and then we also have the restriction of how much revenue do we actually have coming in, to figure out where our expenditures can be so that we can have a balanced budget.
Mr. Anderson?
Well, that brings up something else that I wanted to say sometime tonight, so I'll say it now, that this idea in the legislature that they can keep tightening the screws on local government indefinitely is insanity, and we need to keep some kind of presence or some kind of contact with our representatives not to be confrontational, but to let them know what kind of problems they cause for us. And I'm not sure how or who should do it, but it's something we and every other municipality need to be working on if we're going to have a future as municipalities.
Well, last year, the state did do something to aid. I don't personally think it was enough, where they tied it to the sales tax, that they collect. Unfortunately, that system favored non-cities, and I think the concept there by the state level officials were Madison and Milwaukee gets enough, everyone else needs help. Well, that's great for all the townships. That's great for all the villages. That didn't really help us too much. So if I'm not mistaken, Wendy, we received additional 130,000.
It's like 249,000.
249.
Some change.
So-
And although we're not talking about the revenue budget, I have started collecting information. I don't have everything yet because I won't get all the numbers until October, but we will receive just a small increase of 20,000 specific to the sales tax from last year to this year on that additional. And to answer your question, Gerald, the League of Wisconsin Municipalities lobbies for local government and works a lot with the officials of local government to find out what do the local governments need and want, and they're working on our behalf. So
Yeah,
there
I
is
understand
something
that.
going
I
on in
think-
the background.
I think some kind of direct personal contact for a particular locality also makes sense. And, I want to be as thankful as possible for what they did this last year, but also keep them aware that that's not enough.
Ms. Michalowski?
I just have two questions on the perks. The professional services, would that, I see there's nothing budgeted, but wouldn't that, or tell me where the ones that are doing the trails out at Heel Creek, where's that coming from?
That'll be coming up.
Okay, that's not
Yep.
under this
It's
budget,
not
though?
under this budget, it's
Okay.
under Fund 444.
And then my other question is with the water, wastewater, does the new splash pad have some impact on this?
No, because we don't plan on the splash pad going operational in 2025.
Oh,
So
okay.
they're looking to build it, but by the time it gets functional and God, it seems like a Star Trek or Star Wars reference, but by the time it's operational, the season will be over. So it's more of a 2026 cost. Mr. Anderson?
Mrs. Zarella made reference to the $5,000 urban forestry grant. Excuse me, being in the budget. Now, it says grant here. How does that relate to the grant? And
So
how
I
much
can-
is the grant?
I can take that line item out because this year, it's not a grant. That's a carryover from, it was increased last year to more than 25,000. We had a $25,000 grant in '23. The Inflation Reduction Act grant that we have for 182,000, I believe is 100% grant with no local match. So I'm going to budget that in our Special Projects Fund 213, so it does not impact our expenditure restraint. But I will take out that urban forestry grant notation there.
Not the money, just the description.
Right.
Okay, if not seeing nothing else for those two, moving on to page 8, Pioneer Park Historical Complex. So the historical complex traditionally was funded mainly by donations, that they receive, the selling of merchandise and goods, and our room tax. So our room tax is, collected through the hotels and motels that are within the city. That goes into the fund. We use that to support and sustain this. So just keep that in mind as a funding source, because when people ask you, why do we need more hotels? To keep stuff like this open is a good example. So, the top is kind of, it's also a little unique because this budget used to be very because if you've been in the logging museum, you have the train depot, you have, you know, the logging museum, you have different activities there. So when you look at this, some of this is specific to those based on the revenue collected, based on donations, and some of these are a little bit more in general, based on, we're trying to make that one facility. So it's something else to keep in mind. It's sometimes hard to follow. But this is where you're looking at, you know, the gift shop, the logging, the railroad donations. And then as you move down, you're starting to look at the salaries for the employees that work out there, the generic boiler stuff that comes with, you know, having employees, your lights, your water, your telephone. And then you start to look at some of the building upgrades, maintenance, stuff like that. Pretty much out of the request, I believe everything was pretty much on par minus, was it merchandise we had to cut back a little, if I'm not mistaken?
I do not believe we cut back the merchandise. I just increased the merchandise revenue to be more consistent, but yet still conservative with the past 3 actual years.
Oh, no, sorry. I now find it's the logging building maintenance. Part of the reason why that got a little funky was, if you guys remember, we replaced a roof last year. We were trying to budget to do that this year. So that got a little out of whack. That's why that's down this year more, because we expected that, I believe, to happen this year when it actually happened last fall, if you guys recall.
So if you look in the lower left-hand corner, it says fund balance projections. Just to the right of that, there's account numbers with the titles of the different fund balances. I have those all listed there so that it calculates what the beginning balance of the total Fund 210 balance is. And then underneath that, I added donations fund balance as of August, because obviously we're not through the year yet. But of that $44,969, $27,270 is specifically from donations. And when you look at that fund balance, the first thing that's going to subtract or add in is the projected change for 24. And projected, it looks like we're going to have a net gain of $9,493. And what the mayor was talking about, in 2023, we had planned to do a roof replacement in 24. So we budgeted the transfer in 24. The transfer happened in 24, but the roof replacement actually happened in 23. So I have to record it the year it happened, not when we planned it. So that's why we have it where there was an increase in 24 because there was a little bit of a dip in 23. And then to keep this closer to what the donations are, instead of just building from the room tax, because we want to supplement it with the room tax. We don't want the room tax to go there and build up. That's why we have just a little bit less of a transfer budgeted for 25.
Also, part of the reason why we don't let this fund drain down to the donation level is room tax is not a constant number. You know, it's percent of rooms being rented. So that's part of the reason why we keep a non-donation working balance. So if we do have a bad year for room tax, because I believe 70% of room tax goes to the chamber with the use for marketing. So we only get to keep 30% of that revenue from the room tax that we want to keep some working cash here. So if there is a bad year, let's say hypothetically a hotel burns down, we won't see that revenue, but that won't affect these operations immediately done. Any questions on page 8? Page 9, playground equipment. This one's pretty self-obvious. We were going to do some playground upgrades at Pioneer Park. So that's when you start to look at some of the movement of money. Going to the bottom, you have your beginning, changes, and outcome. Really, there's not much at this point planned that's huge. Based on the one playground that we're looking to update, it would be through donations, which would be at Hodag Park. So, you know, most of that we're not budgeting as an expense because it's a private donation project. So, Any questions on this budget? Okay. Moving on to page 10. This would be boat launch. So this is the revenue and some of the costs of having public boat launches. You know, the city has a couple at this point. We have one at Hanson Lake, which is not real known or real developed. You have our main one at Hodag Park. You have one, I don't even know what we actually call that. It's over by the dog park. You know, I don't know. Pelican Park. Yeah, I'm thinking it's by the old treatment plant, but that's not proper. And then we do have a makeshift boat launch where we used to dump snow into the Pelican on the backside, if you guys are familiar with that. It's more used for like kayaks and canoes, but it's a boat launcher. It's been there 40 years and haven't really been touched for 20, anything major. So one of the things we did look at was, since you guys made the motion in action to reduce the fees for any veteran, that is potential income being cut down. We don't know what that is, so that's kind of a shot in the dark of what that's actually going to have an effect, because some veterans may come in and not know or take advantage of that opportunity. Some might. So until we know what we're actually going to get, that's kind of a little gray area for us. But this budget's pretty simple, I would say. And I don't know if any of you have any questions on it. Okay. Then moving on to page 11, capital projects. This one I'll let Wendy speak to first. So.
Well, I was thinking that Jeremy would like to speak to the Heel Creek trails on this one. This is where that is budgeted.
Looks like he's itching to.
So this is where the Heel Creek funding comes from, and that was money from a borrowing that we had a couple years ago. I'm not sure how much you want me to elaborate on it, but.
I don't know, I was thinking more you could tell him what you were planning on doing with it.
All right, so we had, for phase one, which was this year, 2024, we had 119,000 budgeted for it, basically. And the trail builders have been out there. They've made almost 8 miles of trail, and they're continuing through this fall until the snow flies or deer hunting, whichever comes first. And then for phase two, 2025, we're hoping to reallocate some money into this fund from borrowing that we have left from some other projects, and we're gonna do about the same amount, to try and get 7 more miles of trail and like a skills park out there and things a little closer to the parking lot, so the kids have stuff to do while they're waiting around to go biking and hiking or whatever they're gonna do. So that's what you're gonna see coming up in the near future.
Ms. Mikulowski?
Not that this is necessarily Heel Creek stuff, but is there any plans to increase the size of the parking lot out there it's just going out there for events and stuff. It seems like the golfers really take up the whole parking lot.
Yeah, they do, and as it is right now, it's probably decent. As it gets more popular, we're gonna have to look into that. I know initially for the sled dog race last year, we were gonna, actually there's a little chunk of woods in between the parking lot where it exists right now and the machinery building, and we were gonna clear cut that woods and gravel it and things like that and extend the parking lot. So those kind of things have been talked about, but nothing set in stone at this point. And that's all something we could do in-house very easily with the street department, parks department working together.
Well, if no one else has any questions on that budget, you can move to page 12. So this one is pretty much the city-owned cemetery, which is pretty easy to follow. So I don't know if there's any questions on this budget. So the only question I would have for Jeremy, and actually I don't expect you to know the exact number on this, would be how close are we to fully occupying the space of the cemetery? Because I believe by state statute we have to provide cemetery spaces to our residents. So are we getting close to filling the occupancy there, or?
Not at this point, we're not.
Okay.
I would say within the next 50 years. So, but it is something to consider because you never know, I guess, what could happen. But right now we have probably 7 lots that are completely empty, and those fit, you know, quite a few graves in each section there. So we're a ways out, but it's definitely something the city will have to consider, you know, at relatively soon. I mean, not soon for our standards here in this room, but someone's going to have to figure that out because you're right, the city does have to maintain the cemetery.
So something to keep in mind when we're looking at city-owned property. You know, if we sell it all, you might have to buy some back in the future at some time. So just something to think of in big picture. Okay, any questions about any of the budgets we covered today? Okay. So that would be our new business. Moving on to 6. So our next regular common council meeting will be September 23rd at 6 p.m. Upcoming budget meetings. September 25th at 5, we have a budget. October 2nd at 5, October 9th at 5, October 16th at 5. It is 5:57, meeting adjourned.